Yeah.
I got to start
So
out
that
by
was
saying
kind of
today's
fun.
the 6th of November of 2021. My name's Ernie Mosfeller. And we're here in Mount Dora, and we're going to ask questions of this nice young lady who's going to introduce herself now. Who are you, and where are you from? When did you come to Mount Dora? Tell us about yourself.
My name is Bonnie Kosson, and I came to Mount Dora from Miami, Coconut Grove, to get out of Coconut Grove, and came to this beautiful town of Mount Dora in 1978. Very pregnant with my second son at the time.
Okay. How the heck did you find Mount Dora from Coconut Grove?
Funny you should ask. My parents, who lived in the Keys, retired in Key Largo for many, many years, and I spent a lot of time in the Keys with them after that time, said, you have to go to this town, Mount Dora. We want to get out of Miami. Where should we go? They said, you have to visit this town in Mount Dora, this town called Mount Dora. So I said, okay. We drove up that weekend, my husband and myself, again, pregnant with my second son, like 8.5 months pregnant with my second son. And my son Joey, my oldest son, stayed with my parents in the Keys. So we drove up, and we drove into this incredible, felt like we just stepped back in time. So it was just really, moving here was truly a period of adjustment in a good way. So we ended up that weekend that we were here, we drove around the area, drove all around and out the streets and down the roads, and I spotted this house, and I saw 2 chimneys from the road, and that's all you could see because at the time it was all orange groves, and this was prior to the big freeze. So I said, Jim, we have to go up there and see what that is. He said, well, we can't just drive up the lane, you know. And I said, well, yeah, I think we can. So we drove up, and a guy came out to the porch, and he said, well, hello. And I said, hi. I said, hey, by the way, you don't want to sell your house, do you? And he said, funny you should ask. Come on in. Well, long story short, we ended up buying that house, built in 1898, by the way, in 1978, where I still am today. And so it was fabulous, and it was going to be our forever home for our family and our children and our grandchildren and so on. So we ended up buying the home that weekend, and then going back to, of course, back to Miami to have my son in a little cottage there, and then came back to Mount Dora to live forever and ever. And it was, like I say, a very much a period of adjustment coming from Coconut Grove. If you know Miami, or any part of Miami, you know that it's very, very different in a good way. And so it was something that we just loved when we saw it, and still today so happy that we did that. Although my husband, not to be tragic or anything, but my husband was killed in a car accident a few years later. And I have been in my home ever since, so it's been many, many years.
Wow.
Mm-hmm. When we moved up here, I had an antique business on the side that I kind of did here and there. And when we moved up here, I opened up here.
Now, were you the first to really open an antique shop downtown?
No, there were actually at that time several. There were many, and who I got to know really well, by the way, when actually the house that we bought that weekend that we came up, the owners of the house, the most wonderful family, Dick and Beverly Sanzel, they had 6 children who are now doctors and lawyers and so on. Anyway, we started talking, and she said, I said, what do you do? And she said, well, I happen to own an antique business downtown, which now happens to be the Center for the Arts. So it's very interesting. And it was called Benjamin's Mess. So I ended up buying all of her inventory and opened up my business, which was already, we were incorporated, called Eagle River Trading Company. And so we were in the building which is now Center for the Arts.
Very cool.
Next to the old Romans Bakery,
Romer's
which was
Bakery, sure.
incredible.
Oh, that was an amazing bakery.
But there were other antique shops in town as well. There was Southern Antiques. There were quite a few.
And that whole antique thing started kind of, 78, I mean,
Really
yes,
started
there were
to grow,
some.
yeah.
It started to grow and it started to become renowned for antiques. And,
Absolutely.
And how did that blossom? It was...
Well, I think that somehow, some way, we got a lot of attention from different magazines. A friend of mine worked for Saatchi & Saatchi in New York City. She also worked for the New Yorker. She's an incredible artist, a graphic artist. And she found an article on Mount Dora and knew that I had moved here from the Grove. We were friends prior to that in the Grove. And she said, "You're not going to believe this article." And I think that was the beginning of, it got a lot of attention. So I think that people started to hear it through the grapevine, and people were ready to get out of the big cities, even from Orlando, coming here to commute to Orlando. Of course now, with 429 and it's everybody commutes to Orlando, but at the time it was a little bit of an hour drive, But anyway, I think it just spread like wildfire. The people were looking for these little towns and wanted to go back to that feeling of hometowns and the country and that type of thing. And yet you still are close enough to, of course, at the time, Jim and I would go into Orlando and buy cases of wine at Buena Vista, or we were so close to cultural things that we loved, and the symphony, and we did things like that. So you're not really away from, so far away from everything. And of course, that's another part of the history of it is the Lakeside Inn, 1883. Calvin Coolidge, and coming to, it had a lot of history. My daughter happens to be the manager at the Lakeside Inn, so we'll get a little plug in there. But anyway, it definitely, that had a lot to do with, I think, the draw to, well, needless to say, when you have 1,500 lakes in the county, for one thing, that was huge. Then we had, of course, the antique boat show, which was huge. I mean, all the Chris Crafts that, being from Miami and Coconut Grove and Dinner Key, seeing all those boats, and they all knew Mount Dora because of the antique boat show that we have here.
And there used to be an antique car show back in the early 70s. There was an antique car show.
So I think that was huge.
It was
bringing
giant.
in so many people.
And the arts festival, the art festival, it started in '75, and has had a big impact on that. Was the market for antiques when you opened up? Was it a tourist market? Was it locals? Was it?
It's funny because I had, like as I said, my shop that I took over was the Center for the Arts, which is not a large building. So I was there about 8 months when a big store downtown across the street on Fifth Avenue, across from Buddy Atkins Realty, became available. And it was huge. It was like 2,000 square feet, where this one maybe was 1,200, 1,400. So it was like 2,400 square feet, something like that. So we moved my shop down to that location where I stayed from 79 to 85, maybe, when after my husband was gone. It was more or less not so much a hobby for me anymore. I had to get, a real job. So yeah, so I did everything. I sang around town and sold real estate, attended bar at the Lakeside Inn. So there wasn't much I didn't do, although I always kept my antique business. So I worked on shows mostly because, as you said, as you asked, at that time, very different from today. It was very seasonal. I mean, summer, I wouldn't have anybody come through the door. And so that's why we loved, especially the merchants, loved Honky Tonk Freeway coming in to make this movie of Ticklaw, the town of Ticklaw, and paying us $100 a day for our stores to be closed for like 6 weeks, when we really weren't making any money locally with local patrons, because we really weren't there. Needless to say, it was a big hullabaloo when everybody was talking about, oh, this company is coming in to make this movie, Honky Tonk Freeway, in our little town, Mount Dora. And it was going to be painted pink. And no, I don't think too many people had many objections, again, because the merchants were thrilled to tears, knowing that it was going to bring, a big boost for our economy. And so all the other people that were just hanging around town normally were going to be extras in the film, and that was so exciting. So it was really an exciting time. And then we knew that it was some big stars like William Devane and Beverly D'Angelo, and so it was going to be a big deal for Mount Dora. So I got a knock on my door one day, and it was the art director saying, hey, listen, we're looking for some homes for, the people in the film to rent. Would you be interested? I said, heck yeah, come on in. So they loved it that my house is very, very secluded up a very, very long lane on, 4 acres, and old home built in 1898. So all of a sudden they asked me, well, would you like to show them the house? I said, sure. So Howard Koch, who was Hawk Koch, Howard Koch being his father, they came and they rented my house at a really nice sum of money for 6 weeks. So I said, sure, this sounds great. And it happened to be my husband's birthday. It was in June, July. And so, we had no business in town. It was very slow time of the year. So we took off, went to Mexico for a month, and they had a ball here, and they loved the house. They loved staying there, and we came home. It was funny. We left like a case of wine up in the wine rack, nice wine. We come home, and it's like, oh, thanks so much, but try this. It's like a 1969 Rothschild. I said, well, excuse me. But they were very kind and really very, very nice.
Very cool. So what happened? What happened? You guys were gone, but you heard the.
Well, the film, of course, it was kind of a B movie, but it was, from what I understand, everybody had a great time, and they used a lot of people for extras, and they had the elephant on the skis in the lake, and so. As far as I know, I don't know any real negatives, from them coming into town.
Okay.
That came later on another movie they made at my house, but I will go. We won't talk about that.
Is that at your house, the horror film?
Yes.
Oh, tell me about that.
Did you really hear about that?
Of course.
Oh my gosh. Well, let me just say this, and I will not name names, but I was really foolish and a little naive to think that it was going to, oh, well, we did it the last time with Howard Koch, it was wonderful, great experience. Gee, I wonder if this will be the same thing. They were United Entertainment Corporation out of Rome, but they had subcontracted. They were very, very kind, con men. They were very kind, and it was very exciting. They put us up in a beautiful home off my property, and they said, oh, come down and watch the filming anytime. So I go down, and I have my Chinese carpets not there, all my prints and things that Jim had given me, and he was gone now, my husband. This is after he passed. So, of course, I thought, well, this is a great way to make some money, and it'll be a great experience for the kids. Not so good. So come to find out, everything was taken from my house, and it was devastating at the time. But no, everybody was pointing the finger at someone else because everybody was subcontracted, the art department, the director out of Orlando. So, but they did have an insurance policy, and so I took 6 weeks and through my tears typed up this huge, huge thing, and that's what it was. And you live and learn.
Here you are, you're out from Miami, and you're in this small little town that's pretty close knit and pretty tight, used to visitors, used to people from elsewhere, but you're
very cliquey.
But you're changing their town.
Yeah.
How was that?
Well, that's exactly right, because in this town, especially if you did grow up here, you know that there are the families of Mount Dora. And I can remember across the street from my shop was the grocery store where Joe Mextroth used to cut meat in the window, and his brother Ed Mextroth used to walk around town in his three-piece suit, showing every single person that he would stop and talk to, and I loved him to death. I mean, I thought he was such a character, and I happen to love characters, He would be showing everybody his pocket watch, these incredible artifacts, these incredible antiquities that he had collected over the years, and he was the most interesting guy. So we had characters like that for sure. And Charlie Kane, who was, I happened to work, for a short time as a DJ out at WLBE, and I would use Charlie Kane's jazz program because I also sing. And so I would use his jazz program to fill an hour of my show, And he was an extremely talented, very intelligent man with such an interesting guy, very good friend. So he was around. So there were all these characters. We had Chester and Jackie Calero, who were next door to my shop, we became very close friends, and who were just so interesting in their own right. Everybody had a little something. But it's funny because the families that have been here forever and ever and ever, I think they kind of wondered, first of all, when I moved into my house and flew up to do the closing and that kind of thing, they were like, who are these people? And they want to know. Inquiring minds want to know. So it was, like I say, a little period of adjustment there to kind of not fit in, because they were very, very friendly. But they had their groups and their little cliques and families that had been here for generations, and they wanted to protect that. They wanted to protect their town, I think. From a lot of new things coming in, but I think a lot of people were also very open to that, knowing it was a good, positive thing. I've traveled everywhere, and I can tell you that I still feel that Mount Dora is something special. It really is, and you almost can't put your finger on it. It's almost a feeling that you have. There are lots of little towns around, Dahlonega, Georgia. There's, all these nice little villages that you can visit. But there's something about Mount Dora. And I don't know that it's the people. I think it's more a feeling of something that makes you feel like this is your home. And I also believe that's why so many people, like all the kids that my kids grew up with, they're now doctors, lawyers, and they all come back. They come back to Mount Dora. And you don't find that to be true in other little towns. I think that, something about this town, like I say, it's mysterious. It's something that you really can't put your finger on, but it is something special for sure. And aside from it just being, a beautiful place, obviously, and there aren't many places where you have historic buildings and historic, and of course, if you love that stuff, which I do, being an antique dealer and an antique person forever, um, you know, I love the architecture. I love the old buildings and the history and all of that. Um, you know, you're not able to find that in too many places unless you're in Europe, you know. So it has that, which I think for me is a huge part of it. And you have, like I say, you know, when you have 1,500 lakes in the county that you live in, and you have the chain of lakes. I worked on a 96-foot motor sailor for years in Miami. And so for me, that was huge. I had a sailboat when I moved here, a little 15-foot Mutineer sailboat. So that was a huge part of it, of the draw for us, for me. Being able to go to the, take the chain of lakes and go to the intercoastal if you wanted to. You know, you don't find that everywhere. And then also you're an hour from either coast, which is huge, you know. You want to go to the beach, go to the beach. Go to the west coast, you go to the east coast. It's just such a prime location to be able to take advantage of all the things that Florida has to offer, you know. It's funny because not only have many of my friends moved to this area since I moved here in 1978, but just 3 months ago, one of my close friends from junior high school in Miami now lives here. I just sold her. I sell real estate for Visionary Properties, by the way, and I just sold her a condo 2 months ago here in Mount Dora, and she has never been happier. She said, I can't believe I have lived in Miami and did not know about this incredible town. She's made friends in such a short time. She is, you know, and then you have the, you know, talking about that, you have so many things going on. I mean, if you want to belong to, if you want to do pottery, if you want to have an art class, if you want to go to ukulele classes at the library, you know, there is nothing that they don't offer. I mean, it's really versatile as far as things to do.
And there's a lot more of that now. But was it here when you got here?
Not really. Not so much. There were, as I said, there was nothing like the tourist that we have now. As I see it now, you know, there pretty much is not so much a, you know, when you say, oh, the snowbirds are coming, it's going to be season. We don't talk about that very much anymore because it's pretty much year round. When you see the streets even through the summer, you know, you got a lot of people in this town. We didn't have that before. Well, like I said, in the summer, I really had no business. And the summer, we were, you know, there just weren't many people coming through the doors of the local businesses. It was local people frequenting local businesses, which we tried to do at that time, and I think even more so than we do now, maybe, as locals, as local people that live here. But at the time, I can remember that I would, with a group of other antique dealers, such as Joyce Smith with Southern Antiques, and I think maybe Oliver's Twist was here still then, or was here then at that time. But anyway, we would pack up and do antique shows all over the state of Florida. We would do Orlando. I did Dinner Key Auditorium in Coconut Grove, which was fabulous because it really helped us with the times when, you know, there weren't many people coming through our doors.
Yeah.
When you say, you know, what was going on at the time, we didn't have all the art classes and the pottery classes, and we did have a few museums, well, museums so to speak, art galleries, things like that. But at the time, you pretty much hung out with the locals. And, you know, of course, there was the lamp post, which was huge. I worked at the top of the post, which was jam-packed, 10 deep at the bar every night, and was just an incredible, iconic place, you know. Of course, Will Smathers owned the lamppost downstairs, and he's now my neighbor, has been my neighbor for 30-something years. All of these people had contributed so much to the city, the town of Mount Dora. And but anyway, we did have so many characters, and you could just spend time walking down the street and talking to these people. We had across the street from my shop at the Princess Theater, we had the Crepe Dior, where a couple of characters there that owned the Crepe Dior, who were very, very good friends of mine. And that's the way it was. We had different musicians that were local at the time. Ernie Lancaster, who has since passed, a very dear friend. And then there was also out, if you remember, I'm sure you remember Club Rudo out on South Highland, which was an incredible, even prior to me moving to Mount Dora. It was a dance hall. It was the local place to go for fine dining. And that was, what was her name?
Lotus.
What is it?
The Lotus is something.
Oh, yeah. Jenny Logus. Yeah. And just an incredible human being. So that was there. And there were just things here that were, when you think of Mayberry RFD, you had all these places that were just iconic and were there forever. Just, when I say Mayberry RFD, this is much more culture here, and music was huge on the scene at that time. Ernie Lancaster, as you say, he was with Snake Recording and Root Boy Slim, and I sang with him many times. And Terry Har, and then we had what was his name? I try to remember. At the Lakeside Inn, the piano player, who was there forever. He was just just everybody came because they wanted to hear him play piano. I'm sorry, I can't even think of his name at the moment. But anyway, so yeah, there was a lot of music, a lot of great musicians, and a lot of people that came through at that time, and played here and there.
Why?
Because, as I said, I think even in 78, 79, 80, the early 80s, we were getting a lot of, my friends in New York City were saying, hey, what's going on in Mount Dora? So there were articles written, Southern Magazine, big articles, and big magazines doing articles on this little town, Mount Dora, or newspapers also. So people were hearing about us and liked what they heard, So I think it was a big draw at the time, because that was unusual, to hear about this little town that is ultra beautiful, and stepping back in time, and the New England of Florida, all these things. People were curious, and they wanted to see Mount Dora, not Eustis, not Tavares. They have always, no offense, they have always wanted to be, they're Mount Dora wannabes. And I love them, don't get me wrong. And they're beautiful, beautiful towns, but there is something different about Mount Dora.
Okay, it's 20 years from now, 30 years from now. And remember, in the context of the 1970s, what do you want people to know about what Mount Dora was at that time? And maybe how it's grown into what it is now from that.
Well, I think that at the time, and I think for many different reasons, people were trying to get out of Miami, all the big cities. Like I say, for many different reasons. They wanted a place to go to raise their families. We were the hippie generation. We were the 60s. We were the flower children. We now wanted to raise our children in nice little hometowns with great, no crime, and that was Mount Dora. Everything you heard about Mount Dora. So, and it was true. It was all true. It is truly a step back in time. And I think today, coming at that time, 78, 79, 80, it was like, oh, thank God. I'm out of, as I said, I worked on a 96-foot motor sailor. It was crazy partying, and it was wild times. And I think a lot of people my age, went through those times and wanted to be done with those times and looking for a refuge. And I think this was the place. And I think we were very lucky to find this place as our refuge, and never ever never regretted a day of it. And everybody that I've ever brought here, which is many people, have said nothing but, oh, why didn't I come here sooner? Why didn't I come here 20 years ago? So that's the feeling you have when you come to Mount Dora. And now, like I say, I sell real estate now. Whenever I have a client, they say, well, should we, I don't know, we may go to the West Coast. I say, you know what? You can do whatever you want, but do me a favor. Come here. I'll put you up, we'll look around. We'll talk to people who live here. And trust me when I tell you, you will never want to leave. And I will tell you that I have never sold a house to anyone in all the years that has said anything different. So that's a testament to a great little town,